Okay guys, so in my previous video I wiped all of my xLights setting, got it all back to a pristine state, and I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to go through and explain some of the settings that I configure when I install xLights for the very first time, and explain why I choose those options over other. Now I'm not going to go through every setting, there's a whole bunch of them there and some of them are quite weird and wonderful, but I'll just go through the ones which I think are kind of important. Explain why. We'll start at the top. Render on save. I turn render on save off. The beauty of render on save is when you save your sequence, it makes sure that the FSCQ file that it saves is 100% complete and accurate and perfect. But 99% of the time, I just don't care. If there's a problem, I'm going to click on an effect, it's going to render. The extra time that it takes to do that render on save to make sure that it's pristine just makes no sense. The only time when maybe I find I might want to turn it on is, right up against Christmas. I'm there, I'm making the last minute changes, and when I'm saving it, I want my FSCQ files to be perfect so I can upload them to a Falcon or to play them out of the xSchedule. So normally I would turn that off, the first thing I would do. I usually don't bother with backup on save. I don't feel the need to keep that all the time. I definitely do leave backup on launch on. I don't bother setting an alt backup location. I do turn on backup subfolders. Although, to be honest, in my situation, it's not that important because I don't actually keep a lot of stuff in subfolders. These I don't care about. If you're packaging sequences and sharing them, you might want to play with these, but to be honest, I don't bother. The tool icon size, I like it small. I use this on my laptop, which means everything needs to be small, which means I also turn on the small waveform. What that does, if I quickly create a sequence using a music file, it shrinks down the size of the waveform here, so it's nowhere near as big. It also means you don't get all of those text things there, but the saved real estate for me is kind of useful. So I do that. If you have a big desktop and multiple screens, I wouldn't bother with it. The grid spacing, I leave that as its default. The grid icon backgrounds, I leave that on default. The grid node values, I turn off. What this does is, I don't know if you've ever seen it, let's throw the galaxy effect because it's a good example of it. You ever notice you get this sort of colored bar here? And it's fine if you mouse over it, you can see down here in the bottom that was the galaxy effect. But I kind of like to know that it's the galaxy effect. And if you come up here and set grid node values to off, oh, hang on, sorry, no, not grid node values, I've got the wrong one. Sorry, I've got the wrong one. That's the one, it's the grid icon, it's the grid icon backgrounds. Now it shows the icon of the effect that was dropped there. The grid node values, actually I would leave that on. That's what happens when you drill down to here and you can see the data. So anyway, sorry. So yeah, grid node values I turn, grid icon backgrounds I turn off, grid node values I leave as default. I don't play with the color manager. The render mode, definitely leave it in arrays, don't go changing that. The effect assist window bugs me, goes off. If you're using a lot of morph or picture and you do use it, then you might want to leave it on to toggle or always on. But given I'm on a laptop, I just hate the fact that when I drop a morph or something, all of a sudden my screen reorganizes itself while it tries to show the effect assist window. So I generally turn it off. If I want to bring it up, I can always bring it up at the time that I need it. The timing double click mode, I actually prefer that to be edit text so that when I'm in doing my lyrics here, double clicking means that it edits it. If you turn it off, then double clicking will actually, if I do shift double click, you can see how it selected that piece of the timeline and it'll actually start playing it. I prefer the old double-click mode where it edits the text. That's what I'm used to, so I leave it there. OpenGL, definitely on auto detect. Don't go playing with that unless you're actually having problems with it. Play controls on preview, I generally turn that on. What that means is when you bring your show house preview up and you undock it, like so, you get the play controls down here, so you can control the sequence playback from there. So that's definitely worthwhile turning on. If you've got the preview set really small or it's docked, they don't show up, so it's pretty harmless. Auto show house preview. When I'm on my laptop, I sometimes like to have this on. What that does is if I hide the house preview and I come in here and I play it pops the house preview up. And as soon as it stops, the house preview disappears again. Now, normally I wouldn't have it docked that it would pop up over the top and I'd be able to watch the thing play. Sometimes I like that, particularly when I'm doing demos and the like, because it leaves me with more real estate. But if you've got two screens, etc., I'd just leave it on all the time. Autosave, I definitely on. I prefer 3 minutes. If you're working on really, really large sequences, you may want to extend this or even disable it, but recognize that it means it won't autosave. Duplicate frames, suppress, just leave it as default, don't touch it unless you really are using this, and I doubt very many of you are. Frame sync, I'd leave it off. I doubt very many of you are using it. Force local IP, if you've got two network cards and you're having problems, particularly if you're using multicast, the data's not getting to the controllers, sometimes I would set this, but generally speaking, if it all works, I'd leave it well enough alone. The model blend default off, I generally turn this on. When you create a new sequence, it turns model blending on. And if you're importing some older sequences and the like, or you're not taking advantage of model blending, this both slows things down a bit, complicates the render, and more importantly, some of the imports from older sequences don't work quite right and you have to go and turn it off afterwards. So I like to default it to off. And snap to timing marks, I definitely like turning on. What that means here is when I drag and drop this thing and it gets close to a timing mark, it locks onto the timing mark and I have to drag it away. And if I don't want it to lock on, I've got to hold the control key down while I drag it. So that's kind of nice. That's a really cool feature that Gil introduced not that long ago. So that's the settings menu, the things I like. There are a couple of things in the view menu. If you do AC sequencing, I would turn on the AC toolbar. The only downside is it does take up a bit of space, although you can drag it over here and it means it's not taking up any space. And I kind of like the AC ramps. So the beauty of the AC ramps, if you put an on effect, if you put an on effect and you have an end intensity go down on that and you go into AC mode. Oh, sorry, this is not going to work. This hasn't worked because I turned off the icon backgrounds. When you turn them on, you can see it shows it as a ramp, but because I turned off the node icon backgrounds, that doesn't make any difference. So something to be wary of. The final setting that I like to play with is autosave on perspectives. Normally, what happens is perspectives are only saved when you explicitly go and save them. So you can set all your windows up exactly how you like them, and then you can go and save that as save that as a preview, which is the default preview or whatever that opens up, or default perspective that opens up when you fire up xLights. By setting it on auto save, that means when you exit xLights, it remembers where everything was at that point in time, and that becomes the default way that it opens up next time. The other beauty of it is it's entirely independent of the particular show folder that you're opening. And if you're like me, that you have a tendency to open up other people's shows, a shared sequence, or in my case, their bug reports or whatever, I want the window layout to stay the way I like it rather than the way that that person liked it, because I find I'm a lot more efficient and effective. So setting that option up there really helps. So quick walkthrough. You may have different preferences, but they're the settings that work for me and I find most productive with my little tiny single screen laptop and using xLights. Thanks, guys.